Hi everyone, it's Shima with you. I'm really glad to see you on my channel. And today I'm recording a mini lesson for you on how to draw eyebrows. I'm recording this at your request without speeding it up. For reference, I chose a photo of a more or less thick eyebrow because it's harder to draw, and usually beginners have more trouble with drawing these kinds of eyebrows. What are the features of thick eyebrows? It's not just about the overall volume of the brow arch where the eyebrow sits. We also need to outline the volume of the individual hairs themselves. Here they clearly protrude forward on the young man, and we can clearly see the boundary between light and shadow. So the eyebrow on the left is darker, while the one on the right is lighter because it's getting light, and the hairs themselves are turned towards the light. Where do we start? We start by outlining the general shape of the eyebrow. You don't have to draw it linearly, you can draw it following the direction of the hairs right away. Right now I'm highlighting my drawing. I'll be doing this a couple of times during this lesson. Why am I doing this? I'm copying it right now, and I'll create a copy of this same drawing and continue to refine it. This way you'll see all the stages of drawing this picture. I'm starting to fill it in. I can already see the silhouette of the eyebrow. I'm just making quick strokes in the direction of the hair growth. We see that at first they go more vertically, and then they start to lean more diagonally to the right. Naturally, we build up the thickness first in the area where it's darker. We apply strokes so the tip becomes thinner. Start thin, thicken in the middle, and taper at the end. This mirrors classic shading techniques, ensuring consistent stroke style. Even when shading backgrounds, the strokes start and end should be slightly transparent. If you want to learn how to draw like a professional artist, I have some great news for you. The best drawing tutorial, which is already being sold in dozens of countries, is now available in English. This is a complete drawing course that takes you from the basics all the way to advanced pencil portraits. It includes plastic anatomy for all parts of the face and head. There's a detailed guide on how to shade correctly. You'll learn how to depict volume and how to light your objects in the drawing from your imagination, how to make sketches from life and make them look realistic. You'll be able to draw different objects and, of course, people. But at the end of the tutorial, you'll learn how to draw people of different ages from life and make them look like themselves. This is no different from the technique of classic shading, meaning we should always have this kind of stroke. Even if you're just shading backgrounds, the beginning and end of the stroke should always be a little more transparent. How do we achieve that? You just apply less pressure on the pencil at the beginning and end of each stroke. The hairs that go towards the temple area curve down a bit. There we change the direction, looking at how it is on our model today, or rather the reference, and we repeat that. I'm making eyebrow layers. So as I'm drawing right now, I'm outlining the eye and how it fits into the eye socket. I'm looking at the distance from the brow ridge to the eyebrow. It's not crucial for me to draw the eye super accurately right now, but I still wanted to outline it. So I'm not drawing the eye itself, I'm drawing the eyelid fold. I'm roughly conveying what I see. This drawing is 15 minutes, so exact brow ridge width wasn't crucial. I showed it to enhance eyebrow volume, the shadow receding into the eye socket. In a portrait, this matters and looks different. But I wanted to indicate it so that the volume of the eyebrow appears fuller. Sorry for the tautology, thanks to the shadow receding into the eye socket. Because when you draw the actual portrait, it will matter a lot and will look completely different. So it's still better to draw correctly. Right now I'm outlining the cast shadow, this thin curve of the eyebrow. We have up top, right in the middle of the eyebrow, you can see there's light coming from above. Then there's a thin line of shadow, and it creates the lower layer of hairs that goes up and to the right. And I combine all of this with the own shadow inside the eye socket. Hey friends, if you like my videos and want to see more of them, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Don't forget about the bell, and of course leave your comments down below this video. So in the drawing I layer it, repeating same thing with each layer. I'm intensifying the shadow. This allows me to intensify the other areas, to follow in tone and darkness. So I made this shadow on the eyebrow even darker. This allowed me to add midtones to the eye sockets, meaning under the eyebrows. With this eyebrow, I'm also intensifying the shadow on the eyelids, adding midtones around the brow arch, and so on. Getting back to the drawing, I'm continuing to build up the midtones and shadows on the eyelids and eye sockets. What goes deep into the brow arch? So all of this, where the eye is located, is the eye socket. From the brow arch to the lower line, that's where the puffiness under the eyes usually occurs. Right now, touch that spot on yourself and you'll understand where the bone ends. It ends under the lower eyelid, under the fold of the lower eyelid. So this spot that I was just drawing, I darkened it on the left side, the contrasting part of the eye socket, the corner of the eye socket, if you can call it that, or the edge, I guess that's a better way to say it, of the eye socket. So touch that spot on yourself. The skin is really close to the bone there, so you can feel that bone right away. It's transferred. In general, when you touch your face while drawing, meaning the areas you're drawing, it really helps to understand anatomy and learn it faster, making it easier to draw. And the hairs on the eyebrows start off growing semi-translucent because they begin with fine soft hairs, which are almost colorless. Then they get a little darker, but they're still thin. And only then do the actual eyebrow hairs start to grow. Or hair, it doesn't matter. These very hairs grow in layers. So, at the beginning of the growth, the skin is really translucent, and the tone can't be dark by default. So, even if you have very black, thick eyebrows or black hair, there will still be a smooth transition from the skin tone to the tone of those thick hairs. Generally, in 95% of cases, the beginning of the eyebrow will always be darker, and not the very start at the bridge of the nose, where the hairs are more translucent, because as I mentioned, that's where the fine, soft hairs start first, and then they thicker towards the middle of the eyebrow. But this specific spot, the left part of the eyebrow in our picture, is usually darker, because that's where the corner of the eye socket is located, angled downwards. So we have a forehead that's tilted forward and a little bit up. And that corner where the eyebrow starts to grow is angled downwards, and there's a shaded area there. So that's exactly what we see here. In the shadow, this part of the eyebrow is darker, and then it turns towards the light and fades into a mid-tone towards the temple. This kind of lighting scenario will be true for almost 99% of eyebrows. If the light is coming from below, the situation will be the opposite. There's very little chance that you'll be drawing a portrait, light coming from below. Of course, for educational purposes, that's actually quite good. And in general, I personally like to paint with the light coming from below. If we take the overall mass of all works, the overall mass of all types of lighting, generally the light comes from above. Even if it's side light, it still comes from above. If it's daylight coming from the window, it still comes from a bit above. And everything above eye level, if there's light, will definitely end up making that area darker. Here, I'm moving on to the optional details of the eyelid, the fold of the eyelid. Pay attention to the directions in which I'm shading. So if the eyelid is rounded, then the shading on the eyelid will also be rounded. If the shape of the brow arch goes up on the right side, and I'm trying to describe the shape of that bone. The bridge of the nose goes at the top, already a slightly rounded stroke that bends. I'm marking the boundary of light and shadow, and a slight reflection appears right underneath it. This isn't a very detailed drawing of the eyebrow, but usually, in any portrait, even a detailed one, this level of eyebrow work will be more than enough. So how realistic and detailed it looks will depend on how realistically and in detail you draw the entire portrait. Usually it's drawn more realistically with frontal lighting, where you can really get into the eyes a bit. And realism here is not so much about the details, but about accurately conveying tones and contrasts. So, what's light is light, and what's dark is dark. For each of my videos I say about the drawing, the main mistake is that the colors are too dark and the shadows are not up to par in tone. Therefore, if you build your portrait correctly tonally, in the same sequence as you can see now, at first we outlined the entire eyebrow, marking the thicker part of that eyebrow zone. Then in the next stage we made it denser, and we also kept the right side lighter while the shadow side is darker. And then we just added the surroundings to this eyebrow so that the drawing looks more cohesive, making the eyebrow appear more three-dimensional, just like we see it. In general, when you're drawing a portrait, the whole face is drawn at the same time. You can't just draw the eyebrow and then detail the eye. You can take a look at this. I have a lot of portraits, sketches, drawings. Sketches and portraits on my channel, the sequence can be followed there. Any portrait or drawing really starts with a sketch. So, if you want to improve your portrait drawing skills, first, you need to draw only from life, and second, draw the whole head at the same time, meaning start from the general and move to the specific. Don't outline and then color it in, because that outline will definitely be wrong and out of place. First, roughly mark where your head is and break the portrait down into light and shadow. Under no circumstances should you outline and then color it in, because that outline will definitely be wrong and out of place. First, roughly mark where your head is and break the portrait down into light and shadow. So right away shade in all the areas where there's shadow. You can even quickly smudge it lightly. Not bright, just pale, so you don't have to smudge dirt back and forth and ruin the paper. With a light tone using a 2H pencil, you can start to outline where everything is. Step back, take a look, squint at the reference, check your drawing, and compare where everything is. You can immediately see the spots. For example, you could connect the eye socket with the middle of the upper eyelid since it's in shadow, and even extend it onto the lower eyelid. And then, only in those spots, we specify some anatomical details, like the eye socket. First, we specify the details, and only then do we integrate the eye into it, marking the fold of the upper eyelid, then the fold of the lower eyelid, and gradually moving towards the center. So we outline the thickness of this lower eyelid. Here you can clearly see the thickness of this mucous membrane. And only at the end do we approach the shape of the eye's slit. Why do I always say that you need to draw from life? And here I'm drawing from a photograph. Well, it's because I want you to see a quality drawing, without distortions, without that shiny pencil glare and so on. That's why I have to use a photograph, just like I do in my lessons, and draw from it. And then you can see where everything comes from. But I use the same method as when drawing from life. And then you can see where everything comes from. But I use the same method as when drawing from life. When you draw from life, you transfer volume of space onto a flat piece of paper. That's the main difference. When you do this from life, you're training your eye for proportions. So each time you'll be drawing more and more accurately. When you draw from a picture, from a piece of paper, from a photograph, you're just transferring spots without thinking about the volumes or the proportions. And in the end, there will be even more mistakes. And you're not training anything when you draw from a photograph. Another question. Once you've learned to make good sketches and drawings from life, you can also find useful exercises for drawing from photographs, but only after you've worked well from life. Write your requests for new video lessons in the comments below. Which do you prefer, a time-lapse or this format where I draw in real time? Maybe there's a part of the face you'd like to see, or some object like metal or glass. So, choose a topic, write it in the comments, and I'll pick what seems most relevant to me, or the message that gets the most likes, and I'll definitely make a lesson on that topic. If you like this lesson, give it a thumbs up. I'll know that this kind of content is needed by someone. I wish everyone creative success. See you next time.